Welcome, the entrepreneurial agent listeners. Today, I have the special, distinct honor to have Tondra Devarel, a top producing real estate agent out of the Richmond, Virginia area with eXp Realty, has been in the business, the real estate business, for over 15 years. And we're just excited to have her on today and learn about her perspective, what she's seen in the market, and how she got to be where she is. Tondra, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, guest listeners, for having me. It's certainly a joy to be here in a place such as a time as this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're excited to have you on. I know we're certainly in interesting times right now, sort of finishing up the year of 2022, which has been, gosh, the last couple of years have been quite the interesting ride in real estate, right?
Absolutely.
Particularly looking back over 15 years, it's been quite the ride. And I want to get into all that with you and your experience, but tell us a little, Tondra, about how you got into real estate. What kind of led you into this career?
Wow. Interesting that you would ask that, Paul. But I'll be honest and I'll be brief. I'll summarize it as much as I can. But basically, back in 2000, what year was it? 2007, 8, 2008, I believe. I was basically sold a bad loan.
Mm,
And I was actually didn't know I was sold the bad loan until a year later. I was just coming out of divorce and I moved into
mm,
a home. And so one of the things they tell you do not do is make major purchases when you have a lost one or going through a loss in a relationship because you're thinking is cap is just not all there. And I definitely would say that that is so, and that I am experienced of that. But it led me to deeper information and seeking knowledge and getting into getting into a situation where I wanted to be able to be of help to others and be able to share and spread that knowledge because knowledge is power. And some subprime prime loans that caused the market to drop were not good loans for everyone. And it definitely wasn't a good loan for me. And at the time, I didn't even know the person that I went to seek help to come out of that loan. They mentioned to me that I was fortunate that most people was not going to make it out. And then I started seeing all these foreclosures and I said, this is what they were talking about.
mm.
Wow, this is scary. So I was able to refinance because I wasn't in a situation where I couldn't, unlike a lot of others. And people would say, well, people should have known what they were purchasing and blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
But there is a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of material. For me specifically, I had a notary. And if you have a notary that's not able to really share about a lot of the details,
Mm.
they're saying point here, sign there, sign there, sign here. And it's done in what? Less than an hour which really you're signing paperwork that really would take 4 hours if you really read it correctly. Or it maybe less if somebody on the other side who's educated enough could explain it correctly. So
Right.
that's how I landed here. I landed here because I didn't want people to suffer the way I did, and I wanted to be of help.
Wow, that is interesting. So you've decided and you've since executed to make lemonade out of a lemon, huh? Life
That's
deals you
right.
lemon. Yeah. Well, I tip my hat to you. That's awesome. You're right. There were a lot of bad transactions that went on in that period. I think my first transaction in the finance side was in 1998. So I've seen a lot. And that period was a really crazy period. And it does underscore the importance of trust in the transaction. I mean, as you
Absolutely.
mentioned it, it's like, you're signing all these documents so fast. And even today, in a sense, it's a little bit worse. Not that the loans are worse, but everything now is digital, right? And
Right.
so, people get their documents a lot of times digitally and they just click the button and they don't even, I mean, they're even harder to read. For me, I'm a little older, it's harder to read on the screen. I'm used to paper. And it's like, okay, I hope I didn't sign anything, that's, you know, gives away, my future rights and not. But it does require trust in this space. And, and that's one thing I think that separates, you know, well, it makes a great realtor, right? Because people, they don't know what questions to ask you, right? I mean, you want to find a home for them or whatnot. But I mean, talk about that a little bit. I'm sure you've had some experiences with people that based on you and your bad experience, how have you been able to bring value to people that didn't even know maybe they were getting it because they didn't know sort of the dark side of what can happen?
Absolutely. So education piece, providing them with documents, giving them a whole guide. So I do provide a buyer's guide to my buyers and I go over the guide. I try to have one-on-one sessions just to get a feel of where they are, especially if this is their first time to home ownership. And I go over their rights. And because there are some cases where the lender may be wanting to order the appraisal and we haven't even finished the negotiation with the home inspection. So
Mm,
if we're gonna move forward for whatever reason, then the appraisal would just been money wasted on a home, that the buyer would never own. So there's been cases where people have paid twice on a home
mhm,
that they didn't own, never owned, and they paid for a home inspection and an appraisal. So my job is to be the middleman in between that gap and stop things like that from happening because there is a process and we should all want to follow that process and make sure that we are protecting our client's investment because their money is an investment.
mhm.
To treat it as such. Not only that, but um, during this market, tough market where it's hard to get buyers in who wanted a home inspection, there was so many people that were waiving their rights and giving up their rights
Yes.
to home inspections and waiving appraisal gaps. And I refuse to operate in those circumstances, especially with my first time home buyers, knowing that the possibility of what this could cause them later down the road. And I've heard some horror stories and things that failed, floodings and all kind of things
Mm.
that took place. Had they had the home inspection, these things would have been at least on the radar. So you may not could have asked the seller to repair these things, but you would have known that this is a priority for you when you enter this home. Make this your number one priority to get this fixed because small things turn into big things.
Yeah, that's you could underscore that one. Small things can turn into big things, and what you don't know literally can hurt you, right?
Yeah, absolutely,
ig
absolutely.
ignorance is not bliss, and it's not an excuse, unfortunately, and people that's the thing. I agree. I mean, we get into a crazy frenzied market. People sort of throw out common sense, and some people get lucky. They do, but a lot of people don't get lucky, and they find out like you found out later, right? It might be 6
Right,
months, a year, 2, 3 years down the road, and, oh, you have a foundation issue or you have, mold or something, something that, you see it, right? And nobody wants to deal with that.
right.
Wow. So you refuse to go that route with your buyers, huh? You're like, "No, we're not gonna play that game."
Not gonna play that game. I even had a realtor tell me, "Do you not know the language that everyone's using? Because you should know the reason why your offer isn't being accepted with my seller. Everybody else is willing to do X, Y, and Z, and you're not willing to strike these things out on the contract for your client. Do you realize that this is preventing your client from winning the offer? Like my client has offered well enough over list price that if the seller has any repair issues that pop up, this money will cover that. Why would the seller not want to have some skin in the game, even though it's a seller's market? And if there's a defect, because that's the only thing we can ask for. They changed the contract so where you can only ask for a true defect. So a defect means that it is malfunctioning. It is not working to its original state, and which means that it does need to be corrected.
Yeah. Wow. Well, good for you. I mean, I think your borrowers, some of them may not have understood that up front, but I think looking back in hindsight, they're like, okay, Tondra was protecting me and putting me in a position to win. And particularly as more and more horror stories will percolate up, we'll hear them, we'll see them, and I'm sure you see them all the time in your space.
Yes, I do.
Oh my gosh. So you talk about you mentioned, what you went through and how you were able to avoid foreclosure. And then you and I were talking a little bit before we got on the hit the record button about, what you're seeing in the market. And do you think there's a sector of people right now that may sort of got a pass during COVID and maybe in a position now where they should probably act to sell their home because they could be in a foreclosure situation? Can you talk a little about that?
Absolutely, Paul. So people are usually going to be reactive versus proactive, especially when it comes to a situation where COVID has allowed them to stay in their home, not make mortgage payments. And some of these people are behind on their mortgage. And some of them are even afraid to pick up the phone to talk with the bank. The bank says, We don't know your situation unless you pick up the phone and you tell. Not only that, but a professional realtor. And I've seen so many people, they will pick up the phone and speak with a wholesaler, for example, who has limited professional knowledge that can help them make the best decision. Yes, there's decisions that can be made, but the best decision is always going to be the one that's going to give you the outcome. So what I've found is that it's just like, people don't want to talk to professionals because they're embarrassed. And there's nothing to be embarrassed about. To be honest with you, we all have had situations that have kept us from being able to do certain things and to not feel like this shouldn't be happening to me. Why is this happening to me? I'm a failure. There's no such thing. I mean, the thing is let's dive in, see what the situation is, come up with solutions, and let's fix it. Because the truth is that having someone foreclose on is much, much worse than going through a short sale or being able to sell your home on your own and find you somewhere to go while you figure it out for the next, 4 to 6 months, having some type of money, making something off of it versus the bank coming and take it and you don't make nothing and you ruined your credit and you just don't have any options. So while you are in a place to be able to figure it out and get some options going, you don't know what you don't know, like you said, Paul. So that's why seeking a professional is always helpful because there are things that you may not know that's out there for you and you just had no clue about it, but you wouldn't pick up the phone to find out about it either. So I do recommend that people do, especially if you're behind on your mortgage and your bank is calling you, have some conversation. They may even recommend that you reach out to a realtor. I mean, you don't know what you don't know until you actually pick up the phone and listen and write down the different things that you're hearing, and then choose from those things which one makes better sense for you, and then act upon that. Is what I
Yeah, yeah, no, that's really good. That's really good sound advice. I mean, I learned a long time ago that I mean, I agree. Everybody has issues, financial challenges, things happen, life events, right? We don't nobody gets out of here, without having some kind of issues in their life.
absolutely,
And what I was always taught, mostly from my peers, other business owners and whatnot, is that the worst thing you can do is when the creditors are calling is to avoid them.
absolutely,
The best thing you can do is have that honest dialogue and conversation because I mean, at the end of the day, generally the bank they don't want to foreclose on your house.
absolutely not.
They don't want to do that. It's time. It costs a lot of money. There's just so much involved in it. But the plus side, like you mentioned, is one of the huge benefits if someone's in that situation is, we've had such great appreciation of properties in the last couple of years that so many of these people that might be in trouble have a lot of equity in their house,
Correct.
right? And so they do have probably even more options today than they would have had, even a few years ago where
Right.
maybe they could negotiate something with a bank or your wholesaler or, working with a professional real estate agent who can guide them and give them good insight and options. Yeah, and then you just deal with it and move on. And then that way you could be in a position where you have a much better opportunities in the future when your situation improves, right?
Absolutely. And you have to let fear and let what other people have to say, you have to remove that. Because a lot of it is the things that go on in our own internal heads of how we're going to be judged, what it's going to look like. But
Yeah.
taking action, doing the best thing for yourself, you feel so much better and you don't need anybody's opinion or approval to do what's best for you.
Well, most people aren't thinking about us anyway, are they?
No, definitely not.
After we post that thing on social media and they see it, then they're on to something else and they've forgotten all about us, but that is a great paralyzer for people. I mean, I've dealt with it. I think everybody does to certain degrees. What are people gonna think about me in this situation? And that's how I've dealt with it. I just kinda figure people don't think a whole lot about me either way, so at the end of the day, we all have our own issues, right? We're just
That's
trying
it.
to do our own thing.
We're just
Um
trying to pivot through. That's it.
yeah, yeah, and so but interesting, you mentioned fear, and then you mentioned earlier too, we talked a little about cycles, so we've seen a lot of change. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of fear, there's been a lot of fear in the last couple of months, so much of it ginned up by by some legitimate concerns with interest rates that have come up significantly. Some of it's a lot of hype, media. If it bleeds, it leads. We want to scare people. But again, with your experience of being in and around this business for 15 years, I mean, you see patterns kind of repeat themselves a little bit.
Right. And as we discussed, Paul, it may come at a higher level or a lower level, but it's still a cycle.
Mhm.
And so even with this cycle, still will be opportunities for people. There will be needs for people to sell. There will be needs for people to purchase. So whether it be that someone is a family, got a new job, relocating, whatever the case may, downsizing, there is always going to be real estate transactions taking place. It's just how many of them during a certain cycle. So there will be a reduction during a certain cycle, but then it just evens itself out, pick back up. Because the truth is that the one thing that we have to have is a place to call home.
That is for sure. And the other thing that we very rarely talk about when we talk about cycles in real estate, the basic simple economics of supply and demand. There's only so much land out there, right?
That's
But
right.
but yeah, population is continuing to grow.
Yeah,
And in the millennial group, which is again a few years younger than me, but that represents the largest sort of buying sector that's come into the pipeline ever, and they're
yeah,
very at the front end of that piece,
that's
right?
it. That's
Do you
true.
s- do you see that? Do you work with a lot of first time home buyers, a
Oh,
younger?
absolutely. And it's a joy because they're so smart and savvy. They have done all their research. They know what they want. They know what they don't want. And it's just find me what I need. Their need, there's like, I have this need, find me what I need. So they are definitely go-getters, and I commend them for being that. They are very alert into what the market is doing. They are studying and they're researching, they're watching YouTube videos. They are savvy. They're your savvy buyer, and it's a joy to work with them, and it's a joy to add to them, add value to their buying experience because it is an experience. And for a first time home buyer, it should be an excellent experience.
Well, it should be. Well, so and that's really interesting because, my generation, when we bought homes, we didn't have access to all that, right?
Oh,
So, when I walked in and bought my first home, my wife and I think we were 28. So we were older and we had never been through it. We didn't know what experience. And actually, interesting to your story a little bit, similar. The reason I got in the lending business back in 1998 was the experience that we had through that whole process wasn't a good one, and for a number of reasons. And I always felt like, I was pretty good at math, and I liked math and numbers, and I thought, man, I think I could give a better experience than what we went through, and I think I could connect better. And like we ended up going to the closing table. We didn't even know we had to bring certified funds or wired funds. We thought we could write a check.
paid for, right? And then you rush into the bank. That's
Yeah.
what happens. Yes.
Well, and it was thousands of dollars more than we thought, and, that's what $1,000 meant something, right? We're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"Holy smokes, where are we gonna
Absolutely.
get this?" So, it is interesting how you get in there, but the younger generation today that has access to all that, and as you said, they're more savvy. There's still value, though, that you as a professional can bring things that they can't pick up on YouTube, right? Or
Oh,
learn on their own. Ho
ab
talk about some of that. I mean, what is that value add that they just can't get from, Facebook?
So that personal experience as to what to look for. I mean, sometimes I blow the buyers, even on new construction, I blow their mind because they're like, oh, I didn't see that. They're looking at, so if it's a home that has furniture, they're looking at the furniture. And I'm focused on the ceiling, the walls, and they're looking for cracks. I'm looking on the outside to see if there's any foundation issues. And they're just all about the home, the location, the square footage. So I'm protecting their investment because if there's stuff that I see with the visible eye, then I know that this is something that we need to prepare for and we need to have a conversation piece. How old is that unit? What does these windows look like? How old does that roof appear to be? No, we can't answer that answer to be exact, but we can tell if it's something that's been replaced recently. So just all the components of a home that can be costly down the road that a first time home buyer that's excited about making a purchase may not be looking for. So that's when those other set of eyes come in. If there's a squeaky floor, what's causing that squeak? If the floor is unleveled, there's just, especially if it's an older home. I mean, there's some things that we have to educate because, hey, it's not that what's the issue for one person may not be an issue for another. And so replacing a roof, somebody else may have the budget for, whereas to somebody else don't. But these are the things that we need to do up front to do an investigation instead of waiting till we get there and we put money out that we can't get back. So that's where I'm at with that.
That's a good answer. I mean, I didn't think about that, but I typically think about the negotiation side and the fact that you're a third party, you're not emotionally involved, and so you can represent them much better than they can represent themselves.
Oh, absolutely, that part too, and what to write up, what to say.
Mhm.
Some of them go, "Well, tell them this, tell them that." Not, no, we don't want to do that because that lets that if you say this, that lets them know this. And then, oh, I didn't think about that.
Right.
So
Right, right.
like, you want to have some leverage, so you can't go in throwing your whole hand out.
Right. Right, and that comes with experience and yeah, and I think too, I know you also have relationships with other real estate professionals, so you know a lot of the players in the market, right? So you
Right.
can have those conversations that they just couldn't have
Yes.
and get some insights and whatnot to, the specific market or house or whatever, they're doing. So that's
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I think, I've people have said that, at some distant point in the future, real estate agents, loan brokers, people aren't going to be necessary. Everything will be done in California and Silicon
They like
Valley. And
that personal touch. They want
yeah,
somebody that can say, do, and perform on those things that they cannot, and they don't know what they don't know. So,
that's it right there.
the truth is that most people would prefer using a professional all day long over just going in blindsided, not knowing if they're getting all the support. So it is all about support, education, knowledge, all those things play such important. This is a major transaction. This is not something that's $10,000. This is something that's going to cost you, and most mortgages are 30 years.
You just said it. Well, that was the classic line. I think they don't know what they don't know.
Yes.
They think they might, but they don't. Right. So support and yeah, it's the biggest debt they're gonna have or have probably, and one of the biggest assets for sure. So that's awesome. So well tell me today in today's market heading into 2023, what is Tondra Devarel doing? What are two or three things you're doing that make a difference for you and your business today and you think is going to help you in 2023 going forward?
That's a good question, Paul. So right now I'm going through, of course, it's end of year, fourth quarter, right? In the
Mhm.
fourth quarter, really.
Right.
So I'm just going through and I'm just putting a freeze on a lot of things. I do have clients that I'm working with, but when I say freeze on a lot of marketing, strategy, all those things, because I want to see where is this market headed and what expertise is more important for me today than what it was for 2022 because 2023 is going to look a lot different. And so, following in the news, keeping up to date, following the market. I just got back from National Association of Realtors this year. We were at we were actually in Florida, Orlando, Florida, and so it's education piece for me all the way because as the market change and shift, so should I with my business. So strategizing, seeing where the needs are, seeing where the opportunities are, and also just telling the client, especially the first time home buyers who feel like the interest rates are too high, believe it or not, the rates were never too for a long time, before we saw this. So it's kind of the norm, but it's not the norm for people who don't understand that the 2% wasn't the norm. And so, and understanding that you marry the house and you date the rate. If the rate go down, you can always there's a refinance opportunity, but finding their home and securing their home based on the current rent or whatever it is that you're currently paying, it's going to do you and your family and the community because it is said that people thrive better when they are homeowners.
Yeah, I don't think you could be said any better than that. You plant your roots, your family, you're part of the community. You got a vested interest, a stake in the game, and I think it makes all the difference in the world. I could I
Yeah.
couldn't I couldn't agree more. So, Tondra, it's hard to believe we're like already out of time. Can you imagine that? Isn't that
Yeah,
crazy?
it's been a great opportunity, Paul. I really thank you for having me and allowing me to share my personal experience in real estate. And I'm looking forward to 2023 and what it has to offer. And
Well, tell us how everyone can get in contact with you.
sure, so I can be reached at 804-307-1018. That's my cell phone number, which is also my business line. And I can also be reached at agent, AGENT, Tondra, TONDRA at gmail.com.
Okay, awesome. I'm not gonna repeat those because they're gonna be in the show notes, so it'll be links and phone numbers and all that for you, and awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Paul. It was a pleasure. And I enjoyed being with you today as well.
Okay, take care.
All right, you as well.